following is a paid program. Advice and opinions expressed during the program are solely that of Jung Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands. Welcome in, everybody, to Taking Care of Business today, Thursday, featuring, of course, the Garden Doctor, Dick Zondegon. Good morning, Dick.
Good morning.
It's a beautiful day out there. We got some sun.
Oh, yeah, the sun is nice, although I tell you, the rain is very welcome, too, because that'll get the crops out of the ground and, gardens going and time to get things growing.
And I think that's a great idea. If you're looking for something to do on this beautiful sunny day, might be a good idea to get out there and start assessing and planning and getting ready for that. Do want to remind everybody you can call in and ask a question of the Garden Doctor or text us as well. Call us at 920-885-4446 or call or text at 920-887-9595. And Dick will be more than happy to try and answer your questions. I haven't heard anybody stump you yet, so we'll see if it happens.
That's not true, but... I've been doing this for a lot of years, and so it's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, a lot of experience there, and Jung's Garden Center has been a staple in the area for quite some time.
Yeah, we Garden Center in Randolph was started by my dad in the early 50s, and so it's been there for 70-some years, and there's a lot of people that drive in long distances to Randolph to get their gardening needs and things. But we also have 5 other stores, 2 in Madison, 1 in Sun Prairie, 1 in Stoughton, and 1 in Stevens Point. So we try to make it convenient for our customers to get there. And, the garden centers are fully stocked now. We've got beautiful hanging baskets, and our perennials are all out. Nursery, the potted nursery is fully stocked. I think 4 of our maple trees are on sale for half price now. So if you need a maple tree for your front yard or for shade, we've got 4 varieties of maples that are on sale for 50% off through the 27th of May. I think they're a little bit overstocked, so we're trying to get rid of them. With the potted material, be sure that when you take it out of the pot, if it's root bound, and most plants that are grown in containers are somewhat root bound, you take a sharp knife or clippers or something, or you actually could pull all the roots away from the outside of the pot so that it doesn't girdle itself. I think it was last week we had a call of somebody that had a maple tree that the top was dying, and I think the problem was that he or she or whoever did the planting did not get the pot out of that root-bound situation, so it just keeps going around and around inside that pot area because it's very rich soil, and as it grows in diameter, it kind of chokes itself. So, when you're planting things that are root-bound, it's a good idea to either take a knife or a hatchet or something and just cut into that root ball so that you got those outside roots cut, and then the new roots that come out of the area where the damage was done will kind of blast out into the native soil, and then you'll have less trouble with 20 years down the road, having a tree start to die from the top down.
Well, that's kind of one of those things, too, where it doesn't necessarily affect it the first year, the first 5 years. It can be 20 years down the road.
Yeah, it takes a little while for it to happen, but especially with maples, they're a very shallow-rooted tree, and they tend to keep the roots near the surface, and so they just keep going around and around, and they kind of just cut each other off. And so... yeah, if you're planting anything that's potted, either as a nursery product or as a tree or a fruit tree or even the perennials that are grown in pots, you want to make sure that you get it out of that root-bound situation before you plant it. So, with the perennials, you just kind of rake the outside roots out, or again, cut into that root ball. On 4 different sides, go down about a ½ inch so that you're cutting some of the big roots. And when the new roots that are initiated on those cut surfaces, they'll, instead of keeping going around in the pot, they'll blast out into the native soil, and you'll have much better luck establishing and keeping those plants growing.
Now, I have a maple on my property, and when you talk about shallow roots, there's a couple of spots where the roots have actually, a couple feet away from the tree, have come up above the surface and back down.
Yeah.
And I think the lawnmowers probably hit it a couple of times.
Yeah, the maple, the silver maple is especially noted for that, where they have the buttress roots coming up out of the ground. And my daughter has a huge, probably 100 years old or better, growing in her backyard on Beaver Dam Lake. And so what we're doing is we're taking the area underneath that tree, which has all these buttress roots, and we're taking the grass out and either putting mulch down, and where there is soil, we'll put some hostas or something that are shade tolerant in, and that way you don't have to worry about ruining your mower when they hit those roots. But really nothing you can do with silver maple as far as keeping those roots out of the ground. They do that naturally. So
No
one of my
pushing that down.
favorite trees. If somebody picks one up, I tell them to put it back because although it's a very fast growing tree, it has a lot of problems. So there are other maples, the Norway maples, the red maples, the sugar maples. Those are all have a little deeper root system, and they don't have the buttress roots like the silver maple has.
That's good to know. Now, of course, you said you're fully stocked over there at the garden center, and you were talking about the hanging baskets, but that also applies to your annuals, your perennials, and I'm guessing a lot of stuff for people who are getting ready to plant their gardens as well.
Yeah, it's time. I mean, having just started to recover from knee surgery, my garden is still needs to be worked and stuff. And you don't want to do it right now because with all the rain that we've had in the last few days, its soil is saturated, and you don't want to work the soil when it's saturated. I would say probably early mid next week, if we don't get any more rain, the soil will have drained enough that you can get in there and work it up and get your garden going, because we have a good supply of annuals and perennials in pots. A lot of the vegetables that you want to get going, the cole crops like broccoli and cauliflower and kale and the tomatoes. We have lots of different varieties of tomatoes, so you don't just have to plant an early red or a mid-season red. We've got Brandywine and Big Beef, and I've got some of the Italian paste tomatoes, Amish paste, which is a very productive tomato.
Okay.
And we've got people over there that in the garden centers that can help you pick out the best variety that you want. If you want just a good main season crop, a big boy or a early girl or something like that works really well. But if you want to have the really nice big, beefsteak tomatoes, we've got 2 or 3 varieties of those. And so, you don't have to just get a generic red tomato. We've got the varieties that. And I think the other thing you want to do is keep track with a notebook on when you plant it, the variety that you use. And with the vegetable seeds that you're planting, it's a good idea to keep track of the varieties that you use, because if you find something that does really well for you, then you've got your shopping list for next year done. So, get those seeds in the ground, and if they do well for you, you know what you planted and you know what to use in the future.
Now, we do have a caller on the line. We're going to go ahead and go to the caller. Hello, you're on with the Garden Doctor, line 1.
Hello. I have a maple tree that is probably 10 years old.
Okay.
It's one that turns real red in the fall.
Okay.
And this last wind that came through ripped off a pretty good-sized branch from the probably 20 feet in the air.
Okay.
It ripped that one right off. Now, he did take it off. It was kind of hanging there.
Sure.
Do I need to bandage or paint or spray something on that raw area where the branch was?
Yeah, what you want to do is get in there and cut it off so that you have a clean surface. You don't want to have a jagged surface, because then insects and disease will get into that tree and rot the wood. So you want a clean cut, and then using a pruning paint or something on the surface will help keep the insects and disease things from getting in there. And it's very important to have
tar or what?
Well, it is the pruning paint is sort of a tar substance, but it has the toxic compounds distilled out so that it isn't going to hurt the tree when you paint it. You don't want to
Oh.
use just like road tar or roofing tar, because
Oh,
that has a lot of the phenolic compounds that can injure the tree.
okay. All right.
Yep.
And you have that at supply?
Yes, we do have
your
that at the
store.
garden
Okay.
center, and just
Okay.
just like I said, just make sure that you have a nice clean cut, and if it's near the trunk, cut it off close to the trunk, not
Well,
really
it was
at the
ripped right off the trunk.
It did, okay. Well, then, make sure that it's a nice clean cut, and then use a pruning paint on it, and
Okay.
it'll do very well.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Have
Thanks
a
for
good
your call. Bye-bye. And I imagine there's a lot of people who are probably in the same boat as that caller right now, where they've had a couple limbs come down. Sometimes they're limbs that were dead and dying anyways.
Yeah, I mean-
and many times they're not.
Yeah, with the winds that we've had in the past couple of weeks with the tornado and stuff over near Bayville, and I can't imagine that, tornadoes or something else. But yeah, if you've got any damaged, broken branches in the tree, don't let them just hang there. Get up, and if it's a branch that you cut it off to the nearest main branch or to the trunk. And there's actually a little collar right next to the trunk. You don't want to cut it at the trunk. You want to cut it as close to the trunk as you can. But there's a little collar there around the branches where they come out, and that's the area of cell division that will kind of roll over that cut, and it'll make it, it'll take years to do it, but it heals over that area so that you don't get the wood rotting.
Right. It'll
So,
seal
yeah.
it up.
Yep, seal it up.
That makes a lot of sense. Looks like we might have another call on line one. We'll go to the phones. Oh, nope. That was the other one. Thanks, Jeff. I do want to ask you about, you mentioned keeping track of your tomatoes, so you're pre-prepped for next year.
Right.
And we talked about this a little bit before, about how it can be kind of important to keep a bit of a garden journal. So you know where you've planted things, what worked for you, what didn't work. And, I know talking with other people who've done this, they'll also write down, what issues they might have had, what
Sure.
insects or other pesticides they may have had to use to prevent things. And then they'll also write down what their yield was.
Yep.
And how much rain they've got, and they'll go really detailed with it. And you can kind of go as detailed or as undetailed as you want, but that's a great way to kind of prep yourself for more success following years.
Yeah, definitely, and the fertilization too. I mean, it's you gotta right now the thing you want to do is encourage the growth, because you want those plants to get off to a good start, and so using a little higher amount of nitrogen on the plants, which is what the nutrient that encourages plant growth. But then later on, as the things start to come into fruiting or into bearing, you want to back off on the nitrogen, because if you use too much, it can delay the tomatoes. It can cause the carrots to have beautiful tops, but when you pull them, they don't have any root underneath them.
Right.
And so you want to get them off to a good start, but then as the season goes along, you want to back off on the nitrogen so that the plants have the nutrients that they need to make the produce that you're planting the plant for. And so, the way that I do it, I do use a little extra nitrogen on the onions that have a very poor root system.
Right.
Onions, you want to make sure that you keep them weeded and you keep them watered, and then you use a little extra nitrogen on them, because they do have that poor root system, because you want to get the tops growing really, really well. And then in the middle of the summer, towards the end of summer, the bulbing response starts, and it's due to the day length. When the nights start to get longer and the days get shorter, it tells the onion it's time to make your bulb, and then you don't want to put much nitrogen on, because that will keep the tops growing, and you want the tops to put their energy into making the onions. And so if you want the softball size onions, it's not unusual to do that if you do it right. You got to fertilize them early now when you plant them, and then through the beginning of summer, extra water and a little more nutrients I actually use trickle irrigation on my onions, and that I do on a timer so that it gets it every 3 or 4 days. It gets a good soaking, and that will. And I use the fertilizer that I put in the water. That also makes it more readily available to the plants. And then in the fall, you get the softball size onions like I brought in last fall, and
I remember those.
yeah, they make really nice onion rings,
Right?
and they
slice
store,
on a burger.
You let them dry off naturally, and they store very well. And again, reading the description of the onion variety, some of them are sweeter than others, some of them are better for storing, and I think that with onions, the sweeter the onion, the poorer the storage will be. So you want to plant some of the sweet onions for for burgers and stuff like that. And when they start to go bad, what my wife and I do is we dice them up and freeze them, and that way, recipe calls for onions. You go into the freezer and you can take out half a cup of onions or a cup of onions and put it in frozen, and that way you don't have to get teary-eyed cutting up the onions. But
Cooking tips from the Garden Doctor.
I love onions. I mean,
big fan myself. Yeah. I was telling the wife the other day, the wife and kids, that one of my favorite memories as a kid helping my grandfather in the garden is when it came time to thin out the green onions.
Yep.
And he'd say, well, you got to go down and you got to pick every other one. And most of the grandkids would go down and just pick it and throw it to the side and throw it to the side. And I'd be going through and picking it and peeling off the outside and eating it as I went, because onions are great.
Yeah.
We do have another call on the line. Let's go ahead and go back to line one. Hello, you're on with the Garden Doctor.
2 questions. Is it okay to grow rhubarb in a raised garden bed? And then what else can you plant in the raised garden bed with the rhubarb?
Okay. It depends on what you want to do with it. If it's a decorative thing, you can plant the calibrachoas or alyssum or things around it like that are smaller and will dress it up. As far as vegetables are concerned, probably peas, which will drape over the edge of the container. How big of a container is it?
I think it's 4 feet by 2 feet.
14 by 2 feet.
4 feet
No,
by
4
2.
Oh, 4 feet by 2 feet. Okay.
Yeah, and a foot deep.
The one thing that you have to remember, though, if it's outside, you've got to protect the pot in the wintertime, because the containers are exposed to the cold temperature on all sides except the bottom when they're out of the ground. And the roots of a plant are probably 20 degrees more susceptible to freeze injury. And so, a lot of the containers, the plants die every year because that soil mass freezes harder than it does if it's in the ground, and it only freezes on the top. So, cover it with hay or straw or something in the wintertime. I guess that's what I would do.
So put like a mulch pack on top, but don't worry about the sides of the
No, I
raised
would do the
bed?
sides too, because
Okay.
they're also exposed to that cold temperature.
Right,
And so
okay.
if you put some straw or even some blankets around them, that will help protect them.
Okay, because that was my one worry. How, like you said, it's exposed out of the ground, and where the ground otherwise protects it better.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a big enough pot that a rhubarb plant should be okay. And then too, with the soil, be sure that you use an organic type soil. You can, if you want to use some garden soil, it's fine, but you should probably use half compost, half soil, or a third sand, a third soil, and a third peat moss or compost.
Okay. But you said you recommended maybe peas, kohlrabi, or tomatoes. Would that
Sure.
be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. And that's going to lead me into our next topic I want to talk about, because you guys do have a good variety of pots and containers and things that people can grow stuff in, be it for ornamental use, for their perennials or annuals, right?
Yeah, usually annuals,
Yeah.
because you want if you plant something out in the front of the house, you want it in color, and annuals are the
Right.
things that really give you color.
There you go.
Perennials only are, they're either a spring, summer, or fall flowering, and so if you use them in a container, if you're using mums in a container, they're only pretty in the fall. So
Right.
most people will use a spike in the middle of a container, and then they'll use petunias or alyssum or salvia. There are lots of different annuals that can be used to make a really beautiful pot. And we have some of the really large pots too, so if you want to have a large pot next to your doorway or on both sides of your garage on the driveway, we've got some really pretty ceramic pots, and we also have large plastic pots too, that are not too heavy, but ceramic pots are quite heavy, and we just got a new shipment in, so we got a beautiful large assortment of pots for people to see.
I know when it comes to like the smaller pots and stuff, those are pretty easy. Fill them with potting soil. You plant your plant, and you're pretty much good to go. For some of those really big ones, do you need to fill that entire thing with soil, or can you put something else to fill the
No,
bottom?
you only need about 10 to 12 inches of soil in the top of the pot. So if you get these big containers, you can use like sand on the bottom, or rocks, or not a road gravel type thing,
Right.
crushed, washed rock, so that the water can drain away, because with the containers, you have to water them, especially in the heat of summer, every day or twice a day, actually, in order
Right.
to keep them looking fine, and especially when they're in the full sunlight, because the sun not only hits the plants, but it hits the pot, and when the pots are hot, the water evaporates very rapidly. So, yeah. And with the hanging baskets, too, we've got a lot of really nice hanging baskets. And the 10-inch baskets, if you buy one, you get the second one at half price. So, pretty good deal on some of the really pretty baskets that we've produced in our greenhouses. So, yeah, if you are looking for some extra color around your porch or in your backyard, hanging baskets are really pretty.
You can't go wrong with a good hanging basket. I do want to remind people as we're hitting the halfway point in the show that this is a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed during the program are that of the Garden Doctor and Jung's Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands. That being said, if you have a question for the Garden Doctor, you can give us a call, 920-885-4446, or call or text us at 920-887-9595. And Dick will be more than happy to try and answer your question. I do want to say, I know you guys have a wide variety, and I should really bring a picture up at some point and put it on the screen, a wide variety of things inside the garden center. So when you guys say you're fully stocked with stuff, it's not just your plants, your vegetables, your baskets, pottery. You guys have, pesticides, you got fertilizers, you've got, I know my wife has this beautiful wind chime that we bought there. That she absolutely loves, and I know it's not officially spring until she has me put it out for her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just a wide variety of stuff for your garden that you can find
Yeah,
there.
things that you can use for decorating. We've got a lot of garden art, so if you want to have a whirligig or something in your
Right.
in your yard, we've got some really pretty ones, even some really expensive ones that will really, really dress up your yard. And so we try to be a full assortment garden center. And like I said, we have a lot of the pesticides that if you've got a certain problem, instead of just giving you a shotgun approach, we can give you the pesticide that does the best job on the disease or the insect that you're trying to control. We also have a lot of organic things there. So if you're organic, we have the rotenone and the pyrethrin and some of the organic sprays that you can use in your garden. We also have organic seeds. So if you're planting a garden and you want to be completely organic,
Right.
they're a little more expensive than the than the conventional seeds, but some people really want them, and so we try to have a full assortment of organic seeds as well as the conventional seeds. Of course, the conventional seeds we have more of. I think when I was, counting the number of varieties of seeds, I know because we have 5 different catalogs that we have seeds in, we have over 4,000 different varieties in the building. They're not all in the garden center because the Totally Tomatoes catalog has 500, almost 500 varieties of tomatoes. We have a few of those, the more popular ones in the garden center, as well as the Jung varieties that are in the catalog. But we try to have more variety of things there so that, with catalogs you have to what we do is square inch analysis. So we have to sell enough products from those catalogs to warrant the space. It costs us about $200 a square inch for that catalog, and so it has to sell a lot of stuff in order to have a space in the catalog. But when you've got a garden center, you don't have to have that much volume, and so we have a lot of items, a lot of things that aren't in the catalog, but help make your garden much brighter and more better looking.
Yeah, and again, huge fan. We when we go over there, it's inevitable we're going to leave with something that hangs or that goes in the ground that's ornamental. You can't help it. You find good stuff. It's also where we found some of our gardening tools. You guys have some of those on hand as well.
A lot of tools and edging and the plastics that you put underneath the mulch if you want to keep the weeds from coming through. And then we also have a black paper mulch that I use in my garden when I'm putting tomatoes out. So I put down the black paper and then cut an X in it, put the tomatoes through, and then I cover that black paper with mulch so that it keeps the weeds from coming through, and so it'll inhibit the weeds.
But it still allows proper drainage and everything?
Yeah, it does, and it breaks down so you don't have to worry about picking it up in the fall. You just work it into the garden. I used it when I planted my strawberries, and it kept the annual weeds down. Of course, the thistles, which were there. In fact, I was out in the strawberries this morning. I use a cloth row cover over my strawberries in the wintertime, which is something that kind of gives it a greenhouse effect. And so, because of the knee, I haven't been out in the garden very much, and so I've got some really beautiful thistles coming up in my strawberries, but I pulled them all out, and I have strawberries that are almost red already from that.
Oh, wow.
So you leave them covered with that row cover until the danger of frost is gone, because the strawberries are growing underneath it. It kind of gives it a greenhouse effect, but the strawberries are beautiful, and you fertilize them when they take that off and stand back, and they're already blossoming by the time you take it off. And like I said this morning, I was out there pulling some weeds and trying to get the things looking much better. And there were some strawberries that were just big enough, but they weren't red yet. Or I had some strawberries this morning.
Strawberry shortcake in your future, I think.
There is.
What do you use to pull the thistle? Because I've done the whole get down there with the little hand spade and some gloves and do that, and they still seem to come back.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a tool you use?
I have a strong right hand.
And that does
and the ones that are in strawberries themselves, I just pull. But the ones that are between the strawberries, they get rounded up.
Okay.
And that way it kills the root system. The problem with just pulling them is it's the root system. And, it's like they come from 10 to 12 inches deep. When you pull them up, they've got a really long tap on them. And
right.
The reason I was doing it this morning is because the rain makes the soil really soft, and so they pull much easier than when the ground is dry. Then you have to water the soil and get them. But the ones between the rows, I use the herbicide on, because the Roundup will kill the thistles. Now, if you get it on the strawberries, it also kills the strawberries too.
Right.
I mean, it's non-selective, so Yeah, I don't like pulling them, so I like killing them. And in order to kill that rhizome in the ground, you've got to hit them with something that'll kill the rhizome. But I did that last year and replanted, so I've got some really beautiful strawberries coming. We're going to enjoy them this year.
That's awesome. Can't wait to see those. And I know, when it comes to your planting methods and things you do, you guys actually have a YouTube channel where you've put a lot of videos showing some of the stuff you do, including you kind of experimenting with different planting methods that, can fit for a lot of different people's needs, because not everybody's garden availability is the same.
Right. Yeah, we started doing that a couple of years ago. I haven't done any in the recent past because of my incapacity, but yeah, there are videos on there that show you how to start. I don't plant the strawberries directly in the garden. I plant them in a flat and get them going, or I've got them in the greenhouse, or you can start them in your house so that you've got them going before you put them in the ground. Same with asparagus. I've had just spotty luck starting them with dormant plants going into a trench, and when you start them in the house for 3 or 4 weeks, you get the tops on them. Then you can plant them that deep, but then you have the greens above ground, and they take right off. And we have so much asparagus in the springtime now. I tell my wife, stop picking the asparagus. The stems are getting too short and getting too small in diameter, and we have to let them grow so that we have asparagus next spring. But we've frozen a lot of asparagus, and we have asparagus every other night, I think, as a vegetable, because when it's in season, you really want to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's something where when you don't have it, you really wish you did. So freezing, it's a great idea.
Yep.
I like that quite a bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about watering. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of rain, which was needed. But once we get our gardens established and we're looking at watering, or we got some hanging baskets or some pots, I'd like to ask about water additives as well as when we should be watering. Because I fear, even with some potted flowers or something out front, if I'm watering it at the wrong time of day, I can still do damage to that plant, right?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with watering in the morning is that if the leaves are wet probably past 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and you have disease spores available, they will germinate in the dew in the evening, and then if the dew stays on the plant for a long period of time, the little rootlets from those disease spores get into the leaves, and that's when you get disease. That's why with roses especially, you have to have them where they get morning sunlight and spaced out so that the wind can get in between and dry the dew out, or you can have black spot. The best time to water is in the daytime when the sun is out, so that the plants dry out. And then instead of watering through the plants, you water the soil underneath the plants so that you're not getting the foliage wet, because when you get the foliage wet, then you get the disease started. So, with gardens, trickle irrigation, which is a system where you put bleeder tubes, in the garden, and then you can use like I'm lazy, I try to do things the easiest way. You can put it on a time clock and set it so that it goes off like every 4 or 5 days. You don't want to water every day because you don't want to plug the soil pores up with water, because that's when you get root diseases. So with most things, when you water them, when you water your roses or when you water your trees, if they're newly planted, you want to water them heavy so that the soil is completely saturated, and then let them dry out for a week. When you're newly planted, you want to keep that soil moist so that the roots have a chance to get started. But once the plant is established and the roots are out into the soil, then you want to water once a week with a lot of water, and then let them dry out between waterings. And if you get a good rain, then you don't have to water. And if you want to really be good to them, then you put some soluble plant food in the water, and that gets taken up by the plants and will encourage the new growth to start. So, yeah.
Now, when it comes to to watering, when you talk about the trickle irrigation system. What kind of a investment is that for somebody who's gardening? Is that something where, it's obviously going to be more than just a watering can or attaching a hose?
Right, they're little tubes that bleed, and they're hooked to a main line that's hooked to a faucet, and so you have to have the different size tubing and then the weeping tapes that when the water comes into the tubes it goes out, and then when those tapes are full of water, then they start leaking out and they water the soil, and they just kind of bleed. They don't spray up into the foliage either. That's
Right.
another advantage of using trickle irrigation is it allows the plants to get watered gently, where it just keeps the soil moist, and the plants really enjoy that. They're not subject to the diseases.
Now, in general, does that use less water usually?
Yeah, you can set it so it uses less water than if you're especially if you're using a hose and a water breaker. You use less water that way too. Yeah, yeah. And
That is good to know. I like that as well. I've been thinking about doing something like that for some of my wife's desires for our gardening space. But I guess then I also want to make sure I'm within range of a water source.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
is never a bad idea.
Yeah, you have to have when I built the house, I put the underground water out to the garden area. I have 2 raised beds. I got 2 of them sitting in the warehouse. They've been there for a year or 2 and just haven't gotten around to put them out. But if you have very poor soil and you want to garden, raised bed gardening is just it's really good because you have quite an investment in getting it going, because you've got to have an organic soil and you've got to build the thing. But once you've got it going, all you do is you add a little compost to it every year, which gives the nutrients back into the soil that you took out with the produce that you took out of it. But boy, for carrots or onions or the cole crops or peas, those raised bed gardens are just, the father of square foot gardening really got a thing going there, and it's much easier because you don't have as much trouble with weeds. You always get a few of them blowing in, but because the soil is very porous, that does require more watering than the regular garden soil. But the amount of produce that you can take out of a raised bed is just ridiculous. I mean, you plant things much closer together, and because they have that rich soil and because you water them more often, the plants enjoy it and they just grow like crazy. And before long you're eating broccoli and cauliflower, and then the onions. That's where they really shine. In a raised bed garden where you've got the organic soil, and carrots also. You can plant them much closer together.
Right.
When I'm planting my carrots, I use another thing that we've just added recently in the last 10 years, the seed tapes, where the seed is embedded into a sort of papery type tape.
Right.
And with carrots, especially because it's very small seeded, you just dig a very shallow trench and put the seed tapes in and
lay it in there,
just lay it in there and fill it over the top and water it. And they seem to come up much faster because the paper tends to hold the water around the seed, and they germinate much faster. And so we have things like radishes in seed tapes, beets and carrots, and I think we have Swiss chard, some of the smaller seeds, and they work really, really good. We have customers that said they'd never go back to raw seed with carrots and things like that because they have such good luck with seed tapes. And
Well, that beats the day of trying to hold a bunch of little tiny seeds in your
those
hand and
yeah.
sprinkle them in. And
I mean, it works all right. And,
Right.
when I'm planting raw seed of those small seeds, I always put a few radishes in because when you're gardening, you always have those weeds coming up quite rapidly. And so you put a few radishes in with the carrots or or the beets, not with beans, with beets or chard or some of the small seeds that are a little slower germinating. If you put radishes there to mark the row, then you can keep the area around that row cleaner because you'll see the radishes, and by the time the radishes are done, then your carrots and things are right behind, and they sort of act as a nurse crop to get the carrots and the radishes and things out of the ground.
That's a good idea as well. We do have another caller. Let's go ahead and go back to the phones. Hello, caller. You're on with the Garden Doctor.
Hello, good morning. How are you?
Doing well.
Yeah.
My question has to do with mulch.
Okay.
I have some tomato plants in. I have some pepper plants in. I have a few cedar trees on my property.
Right.
The combination of Mother Nature and the squirrels going crazy this spring, I was able to rake up a substantial amount of, I guess, discard off the cedar tree.
Sure.
Can I use that for mulch, or is there an
No,
issue with that?
Make a very good mulch. But what I would do is wait until the soil is warm, because what a mulch tends to do is it tends to insulate whatever it's doing. So when you use a mulch, if the soil is cold, it's going to keep that soil cold for a longer period of time. And when tomatoes and peppers and things like that are in a cold soil, the roots don't take up nutrients as fast as possible. So I would probably wait until mid-June. We've got cold weather now. I would wait until maybe early mid-June and then get all the weeds away from the plants and then mulch, because that will keep the moisture and things in the ground. And then when you work up the ground, you just work that stuff into the ground, and that'll make a nice, make a lot of compost for your garden for next year.
What about like just a small amount of straw, just to, I guess, to keep what moisture we have in there? Or is that not a good idea either?
Well, it would be the same thing, but if you use just a small layer so that the sun can heat up the soil.
Okay.
You know what I would do is leave a couple of plants that you don't do it on and mulch the rest and see which ones grow the best.
Okay. All right. I have enough to experiment with, so that'd be a good idea. But thank you for the update. I appreciate the information.
Very good. Thank you for
Yeah,
calling.
have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
There you go. And that's another good point you're making. I mean, when people are out there, everybody's yard's a little unique.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's gardening situation's a little unique. It doesn't hurt to experiment a little bit.
No, I mean, and grass clippings make excellent mulch. But if you're treating the lawn for dandelions, don't use it for mulch. You run it through the compost pile, because those herbicides that you use for killing dandelions and creeping Charlie will also take your tomatoes and peppers out. So you can use grass clippings if you're not, if all you're using is fertilizer to keep the
Right.
grass growing. But if you're using any kind of herbicide in the grass, you don't want to put it on your garden, because that'll control your garden too. So, yeah, now's the time to get out and get those dandelions. Weed Beater Ultra, which is the herbicide that we prefer for dandelions and creeping Charlie and plantain and things that are in your lawn.
Right.
Now's a good time to do it, because the plants are actively growing, and they're easiest to control when they're actively growing. And so now is the time to get out there, and if you've got a lot of dandelions, use that Weed Beater Ultra. You can even use it in cool weather like we're having now, where the
Right.
Weed Be Gone and some of the other products are not as effective when the temperature is cold. So Weed Beater Ultra is the product that we recommend for controlling dandelions and creeping Charlie and things like that.
There you go. And, of course, available at Jung's Garden Center. I did want to ask you a question about something my wife asked me about. On our property, we have a lilac. And right now, it's very pretty. But it's been there for as long as we've been there, and then some. It is very large around. A lot of, stalks, I guess, going up is maybe the right term. And every year we say, we should really figure out how to trim it back and clean it up. And we have no idea when's the right time, and we have no idea the best way to do it and how aggressively we
Yeah.
can cut it back.
Okay, so what you need to do is renewal pruning. And what you do is, as soon as the plant is done flowering, because you want to enjoy the flowers.
Right.
You get in there with a bow saw or a chainsaw and cut half of the large branches, the large trunks, the large stems out, and then leave half of them there because you want to leave something for the plant to grow on this summer. And what you'll find is those stumps will initiate new buds, and you'll get new shoots coming out of there. And then next spring, cut the other half off, and then you'll have a new lilac plant. And then just the best time to prune lilacs and things that bloom in the spring is right after they're done flowering. That way you get to enjoy the flowers, and yet if you want to control the size, you prune right after they get done flowering. You don't want to prune in the fall or in the early spring because the flower buds for the lilacs and the mock oranges and forsythia were initiated last fall, and if you do any fall or winter or early spring pruning, you're cutting your flowers off. The things that blossom in the summertime, some of the hydrangeas and things like that, you can prune those any time of the year because they bloom on new wood.
All right. I will let her know, and because I know ours is so thick that at this point you can't see through it. You know, it's a perfect screen
Right.
for part of the property. But there's also, all the greenery is on the outside. All
Sure.
the flowers are on the outside. And we thought maybe probably a good idea to
Yep.
thicken them out and clean it up. So that's good to know. We are hitting, of course, unfortunately, the end of the show.
Yep.
So now's the time where I got to ask you to share with everybody, how do they get a hold of you? How do they find Jung Garden Center?
Okay. Well, store hours in Randolph are 8 to 5 Monday through Saturday. We're not open on Sunday. The store hours in the Madison, Stoughton, Stevens Point are 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, 9 to 4 on Saturday, and 10 to 3 on Sunday. And we do have a sale going on. We have some of our maple trees on sale, the potted maple trees for 50% off until the 27th of May. And we also have some of the potted nursery stock, the Weigelas, for sale at half off too. So if you're looking to dress up your yard or to add some shade to it, then now's the time to do it. And early in the program, we talked about how to do that. But I want to get out there and get growing.
There we go. Well, Dick, thanks again for coming on. Glad to see your recovery is moving along.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear when you finally get back in the garden fully to get stuff done. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Very good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
This has been a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed on the program are solely that of the Garden Doctor and Jung's Garden Center, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands.